What do you do when your tenant hasn't been to their apartment in weeks, hasn't paid rent, and hasn't returned any of your calls? Over the years, our team has dealt with tenant abandonment, and the correct process is not always straightforward. And that's what we're covering today. Welcome to Strategy Saturday. I'm Charles Crillo, and today we're discussing a topic that catches most landlords off guard, and it's what to do when a tenant abandons your property. So let's discuss how to stay protected, act legally, and avoid costly mistakes. So let's get started. Legal process for regaining control of an apartment after a tenant disappears or has been detained by legal authorities, it varies greatly by state and local jurisdiction and is covered under the state or county abandonment laws. So as a real estate investor, it's advisable to be familiar with the local code, including language on how abandonments will be handled and the requirements for tenants to give written notice of planned absences greater than 7 days. So since I'm located in Florida, I will give you a quick overview of Florida law regarding abandonment. And then really during my research for this episode, I noticed that many states have similar laws to Florida regarding abandonment. However, it's always essential to thoroughly research your state and local county's abandonment laws. But in Florida, landlords may presume abandonment if the tenant has been absent from the property for at least 15 consecutive days, provided there is no written notice from the tenant about the absence and the rent balance due is not current. So first off, if the tenant is not behind on rent, it really doesn't matter at this point since they could just be on vacation or they're simply out of town. This really becomes an issue when they are behind on the rent and no one is in their unit and no one is responding to any of your communications. So a few reasons why your tenant might have left the unit would include they've already alerted you and they've given you notice that they've moved out and it's in the end of the lease and they've moved out. Maybe they can't afford the rent, they're in the hospital, or they were arrested. So it's rare when tenants abandon their apartments in my experience, but when they have, I'm going to do a few things. Number one is that I'm going to contact every person who is on the lease and the application. Reach out to any other contacts or emergency contacts that you might have. And this is why it's really important when you buy a property to update the rent roll. Who's actually in the unit? What is their contact information? Where do they work? Because once you have this information, you're probably going to be able to find them immediately just using the contact information that you have. Next, I'm going to see if they were arrested. That's probably one of the big things that you want to check too. And then my third thing I want to do is really check to see if utilities are still in their name. So when you're doing rental properties with most electric companies out there, what they're going to do is once a tenant of yours leaves the property, they're going to put the electricity back in the landlord's name. Okay. And once that's done, you most likely will get alerted that that's been done. But you also can call the power company and ask them, hey, is this tenant's power still in their name? Is it in my name? And if it comes back to your name, that's pretty much a dead giveaway that they're gone, right? They've stopped paying power. That's a huge thing that they probably moved out or something else is happening and they haven't most likely paid their bill either. I'm going to speak to other tenants and neighbors. Okay, so the tenants and neighbors are going to really know, especially in like apartment buildings, they're going to know exactly what's going on for the most part. They're going to know if stuff was being moved. They're going to know if there's a moving truck. They're going to know if there was people that they haven't seen before in the hallways, what the conversation was. I mean, you're living right next to these people. You're going to understand this. Next, I'm going to reach out to local hospitals and possibly call the police directly and see, hey, do you know I'm looking for this person, one of my tenants? Do you have their name? Anything, information like this. So at this point, if you have not found them, I would call my real estate attorney and discuss the next steps they suggest. But this is usually will include them mailing them. And I would send regular mail and then certified mail to the tenant asking them to contact you. And you can get the correct language from your real estate attorney. But what you really want to do is, well, I'm going to send it both ways, is because if they're not there or there's someone not staying at the apartment, which most likely they're not, or you'd already speak to that person, the certified mail, they're going to have to sign for. If they're not at the apartment, there's no one there, they can't sign for it. So regular mail though, because they might have someone like picking up their mail, checking that if they've gone somewhere for an extended period of time, if they're in the hospital, there's probably someone stopping by and checking their mail most likely, and they're going to have that regular mail that you've sent out to them. And they might say, hey, you've got to call your landlord and let them know what's going on. Now, after the time frame required by law, I would do this again for their abandoned property, which I'll talk about next. But the main goal is to find the tenant and speak to them. If they're gone, try to obtain written confirmation from them stating that they are gone for your records, right? So you can, so the lease is gone. Pretty much similar language I would say, like if someone was doing cash for keys, okay? And hey, we're going to terminate the lease right now. It's over, and that's where we stand. Now, what happens to their personal belongings? Again, this changes by municipality. municipality, but the easiest way for landlords to handle abandoned personal property is by including the language in the lease that states the landlord is not responsible for property left behind. For example, in Florida, property owners can make the situation easier by including language in the lease regarding responsibility for the property left in the apartment. And Florida law allows landlords to include a specific clause in the lease stating the landlord has no responsibility for handling abandoned property. Now, for this stipulation to be valid, it must be clearly indicated in the lease, either by being bolded or underlined or being in a separate section. But I would also suggest that you have your tenants initial this paragraph. And this is why we want our attorney to review any leases we're using, because this is the stuff that they're going to pick up on, so we can do this by the book. But having this type of language in your lease will really help with abandoned property, because now you not have to store it or any other thing like this. And as a side note, always have your attorney review the lease agreement before you use it. And each revision, that's the other thing too. If you start adding stuff to leases or changing things, have them review every revision. And as you become a more experienced rental property investor, you'll regularly add all different clauses into your lease as situations arise. So we had one before where second apartment building I owned, some snow came off the roof, hit someone's car. So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, this is now taken care of by your car insurance. This is not something that's on us. And you put that into the lease, right? We had our attorney review it, you put it in there. And so we didn't have that issue again after that. But these are little things that you learn that happen that you want to say, hey, this is not our fault. This is one thing. If you're parking on the property, you're taking this risk. So what happens if you do not have an abandonment clause in your lease? Okay, so it's the first time it's happened. You didn't even think about this. You don't have any type of language in your lease about this. So if you don't have a clause stipulating that you're responsible or not responsible for what's left of the property behind, you end up with personal property in an abandoned apartment. And if you're in Florida, for example, you must follow these steps. When you first go into the apartment, take pictures and videos of all the property left behind, mail the tenant a detailed list of the property you're holding and where it's being stored, giving them 15 days to claim the property. If applicable, notify the tenant that they will be charged a reasonable fee for storage. And if after 15 days and you still have the property, you need to document and estimate the aggregate value. And if you believe the property is worth less than $500, you can keep it, sell it, or throw it away, all the personal items. And if you believe the property is worth more than $500, you must advertise a list of the items to be sold for 2 consecutive weeks in a newspaper. And after the sale, you can reimburse yourself for the expenses related to the sale, but you must also submit the balance to the county treasurer. And at any time up to the sale, the tenant can claim the property. So if you want to avoid all of these complexities involved with handling abandoned property, ensure that you have a well-written lease that stipulates that you're not responsible for any of this abandoned personal property, and have your attorney review it prior to use. Make sure that you document all the steps in the abandonment process and your efforts to contact the tenant and their other contacts listed on the lease and application, so that you're protected if the tenant files any legal challenges against you. And make sure you thoroughly understand their local laws regarding abandoned properties and properties before renting your property at all. So I hope you enjoyed. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, submit comments and potential show topics at globalinvestorspodcast.com. If you're interested in actively investing in real estate, please check out our courses and mentoring programs at syndicationsuperstars.com. That is syndicationsuperstars.com. Look forward to 2 more episodes next week. See you then.
Have you always wanted to invest in real estate but didn't have the time, didn't know where to find the deals, couldn't get the funding, and didn't want tenants calling you? Since 2006, I've been buying income-producing properties in great locations that provide us with consistent passive income while we wait for appreciation in the future and take advantage of tax laws while we're waiting. And unlike your financial advisor, we invest alongside our investors in every property we purchase. Check out investwithharborside.com. If you like the idea of investing in real estate, if you like the idea of passive income, partner with us at investwithharborside.com. That's investwithharborside.com.
Nothing in this episode should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Any investment opportunities mentioned on this podcast are limited to accredited investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure, subscription documentation, and are subject to all applicable laws. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Syndication Superstars, LLC exclusively.